I'm gonna try this out. Let's see how this works. Um, I'm probably gonna say a lot. This is a little bit odd. But we'll try this out. You may also hear the baby in the background. She's sleeping right now, and she might wake up. And she cries when she wakes up. She doesn't want to be home. She's kind of needy. Okay, so today there's no boring. But we'll start with your vocab. You have two vocab words today. The first one is assembly line, which we have talked about already, which is a series of workers and machines in a factory by which a succession of identical items is progressively assembled. We talked about this before. I gave you the example of that wooden stool that's in my room, where if I was the only one who made the wooden stool, I would do it from the beginning to the end. It would take time and it'll be more costly because of all the time and effort I'm putting into it. But if it was produced by an assembly line where multiple people are working at it at the same time, then you can produce more and it'll be more cost efficient. You can stop the video at any time for you guys to answer your questions and to complete your vocab. But I will move on. Then we have meat packing industry. The meat packing industry handles the slaughtering, processing, packaging, and distribution of animals such as cattle, pigs, sheep, and other livestock. The meatpacking industry began here in Chicago and is one of the reasons why Chicago became the it city. It was a huge industry that produced a huge amount of food for people, but also there's a lot of bad stuff that goes along with it. You can stop this video and then click on video 1 to answer your questions. I'm not going to play it because the audio doesn't sound well when I'm recording it. And there goes the baby. Let me try to pause this thing if I can. I don't think I can. Oh yeah, I can. All right. Hopefully she doesn't cry again. Let's see. So like I said, pause this video, click on video 1, and answer those questions, and then come back to this video. All right, we'll start with Henry Ford. Henry Ford invented the first gasoline-powered horseless carriage, the quadricycle. He was originally working for Cadillac Motor Car Company, but he left Cadillac Motor Car Company because they only wanted to build cars for the rich. He wanted to create cars for everyone, your everyday person that could afford a car and buy it, and not just for the elite. So he created his own company out of his garage called Ford Motor Company. He believed that there was an efficient way to produce cars at a faster rate but low cost. As a result, he put into practice techniques of mass production, including the use of large production plants, standardized interchangeable parts, and the moving assembly line. He is the reason why the assembly line became so efficient and popular. He was not the person who created it, it was workers in his garage, but he is the one who established it in his companies. He was considered a robber baron of this time, especially since he started to use the gasoline that Rockefeller was refining in his oil company. But he cared about his workers and he understood that to have a good working company, you had to have workers that were prepared to go to work every day and were treated fairly. This is why in his factory, their workers only worked 8-hour days and they got paid $5 a day, which is a lot more than any other robber baron, not like Carnegie, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan. They're all taking advantage of their workers and paying them cents a day, extending the hours from 12 to 16 hours a day. But Henry Ford wasn't like that. $5 back in 1914 would be around $130 today. That's why they got paid daily. You could do the math. Okay, move on. Watch this video. This one's not posted on YouTube because this is one of my own videos that I got from the Ford company archives that I had to edit and put into this PowerPoint. There's actually no audio. The only audio is just like music, but just watch. Moving on. Now watch video 3. Video 3 has no questions to it. It's just more of a culture attribute because Charlie Chaplin will become one of the most famous actors of the 1920s and of American culture. Modern Times is one of the films that's part of the American culture. So you can pause this video and go and check that video out. And so moving on to Chicago, right? As you see, that is Chicago skyline today. You probably won't see it in the summer because we'll still be in quarantine. Who knows? But we're going to talk about Chicago back in the turn of the century. The picture you see there is from the 1900s. That is State Street. State Street was one of the most busy streets where a lot of the commercial buying and selling was happening. Today, we still have a lot of stores on State Street, but it wasn't as colorful as it was back then. All right, so we'll start with Chicago. The Great Chicago Fire took place in October of 1871 and killed 300 people and destroyed 3.3 square miles. And no, I don't know what really started the fire. We have theories on what started the fire. Some people say it was because a cow who tipped over a lantern, meaning it had hay, and then all things blew up and just the fire got out of control. Another idea was that a meteorite hit Wisconsin and one of the pieces of meteorites landed in Chicago, and then that started the fire. We don't really know. Right? But whatever it is, at the end of the day, 3.3 square miles of the city were destroyed. It devastated the city, but also was a new opportunity. This is a chance that Chicago got to rebuild itself, get away from wooden buildings, and start using steel. We have the first skyscraper ever built was built in Chicago in 1885, and they were using Carnegie steel. The Home Assurance Building was located on the corner of Adams and LaSalle Street, and like always, none of you probably know where that's located. It was 138 feet tall. It stood until 1931 when it was demolished to build a larger structure. LaSalle Street is today where you have a lot of like the banking business and the exchange and so those type of things. The only reference you guys probably have to LaSalle Street is Batman, one of the Batman movies, one with the Joker, like from a bit ago. The Dark Knight, I think it was called. That's big scene when they're fighting. The Joker and Batman are fighting, and the Joker almost takes Batman's mask off. That's LaSalle Street, and that's probably the only reference movie you may have, and not even that. Like we talked about, Chicago was its city. All the railroads led to Chicago. This is a map of the railroads in 1900. As you see, all of them are congested in this one location. You could not go from the East Coast to the West Coast without passing through Chicago first. Pause this video and watch video 4. Video 4 is a glimpse of the city in the turn of the century from the 1880s to the 1920s. The railroads and Chicago becoming its city, a lot had to do also with Chicago stockyards. This is where the meat was produced during this time. Farmers would send their sheep, their cattle, their pigs to Chicago to be processed and sold to the public. Where the Chicago stockyards were located, today you still have some meat packing factories there. Now pause this video and watch video 5. This is a look of the Chicago stockyards. It's obviously not a real picture, just a map to give you an idea. This was the actual mapping out of the stockyard. It was located in the south side of Chicago in that section that's colored in red. We are probably somewhere, the school is located somewhere up here. And the Chicago stockyard is located there. Today, like I said, you will still find some companies that still produce meat. They do tend to sell to the public as well. You also have the Chicago Flea Market on Ashland, and I can't remember, I think 46, I don't know, I can't remember the street, but it's also located down there. Chicago was able to become the biggest producer of meat because most Midwestern farmers could send their cattle to Chicago through the railroads, because all railroads led to Chicago. To prevent having to drive the animals to the city, the Union Stockyard was created in 1865. The Union Stockyard was a transit company in 1865 built an innovative facility that was accessible to all railroads serving Chicago. Right, the idea was, well, all railroads already lead to Chicago. Why don't we build a stockyard in Chicago, since all railroads already lead to Chicago? The huge stockyard received 3 million cattle and hogs in 1870, and by 1890, they received up to 12 million animals. And this is kind of how it looked. We had all these small pens where they would hold the animals. Then on the outskirts, you see in the background, you would have all these companies that their main purpose was to produce meat, chop up the animal and sell it to the public. So what you would have is you would have people working from these companies come down to these different pens, and they would check out the animals, and then they would buy the animals, and then they would take them up these chutes here into the factories to actually do the processing of the animals. One of these big people was Gustavus Swift. Gustavus Swift was the first person to create an ice-cold railroad car and built his meatpacking empire in Chicago. Right, an ice-cold railroad car was necessary to transport meat from one side of the country to the next, because he was able to run those cars in a cooling temperature. The meat will be preserved until it reaches destination, and people could still have edible meat to purchase and consume. He also began to use animal byproducts for manufacturing goods as soap, glue, medicines, and so on, define animal byproducts. But the idea is that he would use every single part of that animal to produce other things besides just food. Gelatin is an animal byproduct. It comes, the actual substance of gelatin is from pork. His company would slaughter an estimated 2 million cattle, 4 million pigs, and 2 million sheep a year. And like I said, he would use every single part of that animal. Swift once was heard bragging about that he would use even the squeal of the pig if he could. But the issue with the meatpacking industry was that there were no federal laws to protect the consumer, that the meat was disgusting. Meat was mixed with rat droppings, dead rodents, sawdust, even mixed spoiled meat with new meat. there was no regulations. There was no one to keep track of what's going into these bins, what's going into these meat. They would sell it as new meat or special meat, and they would actually sell it for a bigger, more expensive because it's special meat. But like I said, there was no one in the federal government or even in the state government that would be like, this is not clean, this is dirty, we need to clean this up. It's not like these factories were the cleanest places. You always had blood and piece of meat everywhere. They used to drop sawdust on the floor to absorb all the extra liquids and blood from the animals, but it's not like they were changing them so often. They would stay there, then they would sometimes just add new sawdust or the old one. Animals like rats were a big issue. Sometimes they even would mix the rats, dead or alive rats, with the meat when they were grounding it to make like the hamburger meat. Um, it was not the best or most hygienic place, but because no one was checking if these factories were clean, it's not like they cared. Swift's net worth was an estimated $135 million, which he donated large sums to charities and schools. Swift was also another one of the robber barons, but he was one of the robber barons that were unjust to his people, were not always cared about his own people. He actually created his own town, Pullman, where he tried to create this utopian world where everything is run normally and perfectly, but he was so unjust to his workers and to the situation that it didn't work out well. This is one of the carts that he created. Like I said, this purpose of these carts were to transport fresh meat, but because they were refrigerated, they were kept at a low temperature that would preserve the meat. Right? And then the last thing will be just to describe these images. This is the processing of the meat picking industry. Like I said, in number one, you have the pans where animals will be pushed into these different pans. Then the people from the companies will come in and they would check which animals and purchase the animals. Then the animals would be switched over to the company, where the first part would be to be cleaned. Wasn't the best thing. Then they would go through the processing, the different parts, cutting up the animal. They would hang the animal, cut it open. By the time the animal was hanged, it was supposed to be dead. It wasn't always the case. And then they will allow the blood just to drip out. Then they will begin to carve out the animal and then, cut up and hang the other parts. This is how they kill the animals. You literally had the animals coming in through these shafts. You had someone above them with a hammer hitting them on the head. Obviously, the animal was tortured in a way. They didn't die from very quickly, and then things got really bad to a point where, like, if the person with the hammer didn't hit it hard enough or in the right spot, the animal would still be alive, agonizing in pain and going crazy. Blood would be thrown everywhere. They were not the best hygienic places. This is another example of from 1894, where you have all these pigs hanging. Like I said, they would have these pigs hanging on the floor. They would have the blood drip out. They would throw sawdust on that floor to pick up the liquids, but it's not like they tended to replace that sawdust. And if one of those animals fell to the ground, they would just pick it up and put it back on the rack. Same situation here. Then this is what we call the pickled room, where you have all of these meat pieces like hanging. Some of them you're waiting for drying. In other words, we're putting in, like the pickled juices, like an acid, where men's fingers were burned off because of the acid. But like I said, these stores are very disgusting. The workers themselves were wearing clothes that they were on the street. And you have to keep in mind that hygiene was not very popular at this time. So a lot of these men were not even taking showers or baths weekly. They were in the same clothes they've been in for a week. They were changing clothes when they came in. That's how they went home and came back. The men themselves will spit on the floor, walk on the floor. Nothing was clean. If the meat fell off the wall onto the floor, they would just pick it up and put it back up there. There was a rat problem. There was just a lot of things that were disgusting. This is another picture of this is in Swift's company where they're just chopping up the meat. If you look at those knives that they're carrying, it was very easy for people to lose track at one point, and they would chop off parts of their body. But like I said, during this time, if you were hurt in the job, it is your fault. You are fired, and you would be replaced by someone who was waiting outside to take a job. There was nothing to protect these workers from being mistreated. Okay, and then that is it. Okay, finish up the questions. Make sure you look at those videos. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. You have to remember that you have a test on the 31st. Obviously, it's not going to be your typical test where you have multiple choice questions, because all you will do is Google it. And you will have a short response questions, which you can Google, but it's very obvious when you guys Google questions. So you can't even do it right. Okay? And we'll see when we'll see each other again. We're supposed to go back to school on the 21st of April. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Hopefully. But otherwise, I'll record some other presentations. But stay safe, stay inside. Don't go outside, people. Now time to chill. And stay healthy.